We got to Halloween yet.
Oh, I'm ready for Halloween too. I don't even like it. No, I am not allergic to it.
All right. So
Are you allergic to the yeah. You know the ones that's like it looks like a strawberry? Like, yeah, I can't have that. I hate it anyway, but I can't.
all right.
The only thing I eat is the Hershey.
All right. So we got a shorter class period, so I'm gonna try to run through this pretty quickly. But that doesn't mean that you should let me lose you. If I need to slow down, I slow down. And you know, it is what it is. The assignment for this week is on loops and the things that we covered in class last time. So we're gonna do the lab. If you guys want to go ahead and get idle up and running, you can follow along with me and have your lab already done and ready to turn in, and you won't have to go home and do it over the weekend. I am running into quite a few people that are still turning in the wrong files. I have 1 or 2 students that are turning in the shell window still. Please don't turn in the shell or the runtime environment. I need the saved file. I'm going to show you one more time how to do that. Also, I have at least one person that's just turning in like a text file. I'm guessing they're probably using a different IDE than idle, and they're copying and pasting it into a text file for me. That doesn't run either. After this, starting this week, not after this week, starting this week, I'm not going to give you an opportunity to resubmit. I'm just giving you a 0 if it doesn't run. Just wait until it's yours, and then you'll be regretting you said that. You don't learn your lesson. So I hate to be that way, but I don't know how else to get their attention because it's the same people over and over and over again. It's not like it's different people. So remember, go to new file, get this window that says untitled, do all your work in this one. Make sure you save it as your first name, your last name, and the assignment. So we're in here, we're doing this. So if we just jump straight into the code without much ado, let me get it big enough for everybody in the back to see it. So I have a Word document on one side of the screen, and then I have the idle screen on the other, so we can try to see it as we go along. This is when I wish I had 2 monitors, but all right, so we did part A. We started idle and we named it first name, last name, lab 3, right? Everybody's done that. Almost? Good. You ran into an issue. All right, so the first part is going to have us practicing using those turtles that we just created, right? We learned about turtles. Turtles are a great thing. So we're going to put in a comment to tell me that it's part 1. And yes, I grade you down if the comments aren't there. If the directions say comment and you don't put comment in, I take at least a point off of your grade. And if it's only 10 points, that's a letter grade, right? Yeah. So if it says add a comment, add a comment. And that's another point that I've had a couple of people argue with me about. Well, what I did accomplish the task. Well, not really, because you didn't follow the directions. You got some output that looks similar, but I specifically said to do it this way. That's what I'm grading for. If you are one of those people that has already had Python experience, or you've looked it up on some lovely website and that you've used something I haven't taught, I'm probably not going to give you full credit for it because you didn't follow the directions. If we're doing loops, I need to see loops. If we're doing print and input statements, I need to see print and input statements. All right, so down here, we want to go ahead and start writing code to create a turtle. The first thing we have to do is import turtle. So your next line should be the import statement. And notice import turned yellow, orange. It's a weird kind of color because it's a keyword. The great thing about IDEs is that keywords are color coded in different ways, and you know that you spelt it correctly. So like if you're typing print and it didn't turn purple or blue or whatever color it is to you, then you know you misspelt it. And yes, you can misspell print. I misspell print all the time. It's amazing how my fingers don't keep up with my brain. So if you're expecting it to be a keyword or something and it didn't change colors, something's wrong. All right, so then we need a window for our turtle to live in. See, I just misspelled window. We don't need a widow, we need a window. All right, and it's going to be equal to turtle dot screen. And we really haven't talked about this much, but the reason it's turtle dot screen is because we want the turtle class to call the function screen from inside of itself, or the turtle module. Does that make sense? So we imported it. Now we want to use a function from there. So we're going to say turtle dot whatever the function is. It'll make more sense as we go along, promise. And now we want to create our turtle. And this, you do not have to use Alex as your name for your turtle, but that's what we used in the directions. So you can name him Jeffrey if you want to. The only problem with naming him Jeffrey is that it's a much longer name and you have to type more letters. I'm a computer scientist. I'm lazy, so I'm going for something like Tom, Bob, Alex. Joe. That's 3 or 4 letters.
All right, Joe it is.
Joe it is. You can name it Joe. That's fine. And this line, where you're going into the turtle module, and then we're calling dot turtle with a capital T. And I told you that we don't use capital letters except in special cases, right? This is one of those special cases. This is a constructor. This is calling a function from turtle that actually creates an object, which is going to be our turtle that we're going to draw with. So once we've done that, we've created a turtle, and you can stop here and save it and run it. And it pulls up the window and you got your little turtle. Right? Now it's a triangle, so let's change its shape because I like it when it looks like a turtle. Does anybody remember how to change its shape? And this was in the slides, but it's not necessarily, I don't think it's in the directions, but it was in the slides from last week. Now if I run it, I have a little turtle. Right? Like turtles. All right. You can, and then you can go look up the things to change its color if you want to, but I'm just gonna leave him like he is right now. So next we want to do is we want to move our turtle to the top left-hand corner if you're looking at the screen of our window. Why? Because I'm fixing to draw something and I'm getting to a starting point. So I'm going to pick up his pen. It's actually just up. And then I'm going to tell him to go somewhere. Why am I telling him to go to 300, negative 300, 300? That's the coordinates for the left corner. So he moved up here, right? Now, if you are looking at the screen and you draw an imaginary cross through it, so you draw yourself an x-axis and a y-axis. No, that's x-axis and a y-axis. Oh, it's gonna be a day. And you think about it that way. The center is always going to be 0, 0. When you move to the left from center, you're going in a negative x direction. If you move to the right, it's a positive x direction. If you go up, it's a positive y. If you go down, it's a negative y. This is where I wish I had my tablet and my pen where I could draw on this. Next time, I will do that next time. Does that make sense? For you guys that you're in class, I can put that on the board. Remember for math that you have x-axis, your y-axis. This point is 0, 0. Go negative this way. And positive this way. Right? Okay. So we've done that. So now that we've got our turtle up here, we're going to put our pen down and start drawing. And all right, so I've typed in 3 new commands. Alex down puts the pen down, so this time when our turtle moves, it's going to leave a trail behind him. We're going to move forward 300. What 300 is a unit of measure. What unit are we using? Pixels. So each one is tiny, right? So if you put in forward 1, you're probably not going to see a noticeable difference to your naked eye. Because your turtle is bigger than 1 pixel wide. He's not going to noticeably move. So we're going to move 300 pixels where we can have a pretty good sized box for you to see as we're drawing. And then the last thing I put in was Alex dot right. It was 90. Yes, sir.
How far he moved depend on the resolution of your monitor?
It depends on the resolution of your window.
Okay.
So we're using the window. And yeah, it will look a little bit different if you have a much higher resolution monitor than if you, but you still will be noticeable at 300.
Okay.
And if you're blind like me, it's a lot more noticeable at my resolution because it's bigger. So if we run it now, he went across and he turned right 90 degrees. This is the turtle's right. So you have to think about it from the turtle's perspective on right and left, not your perspective when you're looking at the screen. So pay attention to which way your turtle is facing before you make this. So if I'm drawing a box, what do you think I'm going to do next? Yes, I want to draw the rest of the box. What is the next command I want to do? No, he always moves forward. There is no down.
Oh, Alex forward?
Yes.
Sorry.
If you use up and down, all you're doing is playing with his pen. Whether or not he's drawing, right? Because up means pick up the pen, down means put down the pen. So Alice needs to go forward again. And since it's a square, and all my math people back me up on this, a square is got equal sides and equal angles, right? So every side is 300 pixels. I copied and pasted. I'm going to go forward again, and then I'm going to go right again. And I'm going to do that. for each side, right? And you don't have to put all these extra spaces in there. I'm doing it just where you guys can see it here in class. But a square has 4 sides, so I need forward and right 4 times. Yes? Cool. So it's spelled out here in the document, so I just did it without you having to read it. Now, if I run this, now I put the turtle back exactly where he was when we started. Could you have left that last turn right off and still have a square? Yes, but you don't know which direction your turtle's facing necessarily at that point. So I like to put my turtle back facing in the same direction every time, because then I don't get confused when I start drawing the next shape. That makes sense? Okay. And if you decide your turtle's drawing too fast, you can look up the speed function and you can make your turtle draw slower where you can watch him. Or you can make your turtle go even faster if you don't want to watch it.
Speed racer.
You can be a speed racer, yes. And the reason I tell you that is because when we do our first project, which is coming up relatively soon, you might want it to draw faster where you don't have to sit there and watch it. After the 4th or 5th time through.
So I'm trying to fix errors.
Why do you need to see my screen to spell forward correctly?
I'm so tired right now.
I get you. I get you. All right. So it feels like Monday. This week, it's felt like a week of Monday. So I feel you. All right. So now the next thing it wants us to do is wants us to draw another box right next to this one. Right? So we need to reposition our turtle to draw the box. So if we want to put a square right next to this one, we need to move to the end of this one. Now, if you pick up the pen, because you don't want to keep drawing, because you're just randomly moving, it wouldn't really matter in this case because we're going to be moving across a line we've already drawn. But it's good practice to pick up the pen before you start using a go-to. So Alex got up. And we're going to move him over 300 pixels to the right, if you're looking at it, and then draw another box. Right? So where do I need to position my turtle at if you're thinking about your grid system? And you can read it off the paper and it's 0, 300, but it's just 300 pixels to the right. So, and you're all going to go, how am I going to figure out these coordinates? It's a little bit of trial and error. After you've drawn your turtle for a while, you're going to go, that looks about 100 pixels. But it is going to be some trial and error trying to get everything aligned exactly the way you want it. So I'm going to move in there. And then I have to remember, this is the thing that people forget. Put your pen back down. Because I can't tell you how many people have asked me, why didn't it draw? Well, you forgot to put your pen down and it moved. It just didn't drag the pen behind it. So we're going to put the pen back down. And we're going to draw another square right next to it. Well, guess what? We already know how to draw a square. We have the code right here for that, right? So I can copy it and paste it. Right? And it should draw me another square. Because we tested it already. We know that code draws a square. Or you can hand type it all again. If you want to. If you're one of those people like me that practice makes it sink in better. Hand type it all again, and you'll embed those commands into your head. But now I'm going to put a little comment in here for me that says second square. As soon as I learn to spell. Now, why did I put that comment there? Purely for me to divide up code. So when I'm looking at it, and it's a long scroll down amount of code, I know where each section is. Does that make sense? Do you have to do it? Only if it's in the directions. But if it makes your life easier to break things up with a comment, throw a comment in. I will not grade you down for having too many comments unless you give me like a novel's worth. And even then, I'm probably not going to grade you down for it because I'd rather see too many comments than not enough. So now when I run it, I get 2 boxes. Everybody got 2 boxes? You got a problem.
I just need like 5 seconds.
You need 5 seconds. Okay, everybody test this to make sure it works. Let me check on 5 seconds back here. It's perfect. Okay. See, I love it when you fix your own problems before I get there.
Just need to get your steps in.
Yeah, I definitely need my steps in today. All right. Now, I will tell you this, if for some reason you can't find this window, that you just drew something and the window didn't pop up, sometimes it ends up in the background. You might have a window over it, so minimize and you'll find it. That makes sense? If after you minimize, you still can't find your screen, then you need to go back and make sure that you put that command in. All right. So now we're to part C. This is where we're going to talk about that refactoring. I told you on Wednesday that we would talk about refactoring a little bit. We just wrote a whole lot of code that looks a lot like this. How can we make it shorter and less lines of code? Because that's basically what refactoring is. How do we make less lines of code do the same thing? Paying attention to me will be much more beneficial to you and your neighbors.
No, like he got his, his turtle just is going where the square's supposed to go, but it's not drawing.
Put the pen down.
He did it. He messed up. He got straight syntax errors on it.
All right, I'll look at his in just a second. I will help him in just a second. All right, so if we're looking at our code, we repeated a lot of lines. And what did we learn new this week? Loops. So what do loops do? They repeat things. They loop. All right, I got a bunch of comedians in this class. So if I'm looking at my first square up here, these lines are very repetitive, right? It's the same lines over and over again. So if I take these lines out, we'll get rid of those. And in here, I'm going to put for I in range 4. Oops. So I can take a for loop. It's going to go 4 times. And I'm going to just repeat those lines of code. That's much simpler, right, than the original box. Yes. And then once I got this loop working, I'm going to test it and make sure it works before I change too much. Always test in small increments. Still draws a box, right? So now I can take that loop and replace this code with that loop. And now all my code fits in one screen instead of having to scroll forever, right? You look confused. Ask questions. You don't know what to ask yet. Okay, I will come talk to you in just a second. How about that? All right, did you three back there get sorted out?
Oh, yeah.
Did you sort him out? Did you sort him out?
It was. I did it.
So maybe two separate.
Okay, well, I'm proud of you then.
He's over here talking shit, so I.
Language, we're being recorded. All right, so loops are your friend. If you've got to do something a lot and repeated, you want a loop. So let's talk about this loop a little bit. So we're using the keyword for. I is just a variable I created. Remember, I like to use I because I'm old and it stands for index. Then we want to put a colon, which we haven't been using. So this is going to be a key syntax error for people for a while until we get used to for loops have colons at the end. And then we're going to indent the lines we want to belong to the for loop. And we're going to use the tab key to do our indentations, right? Because if you use the space bar and you forget how many times you spaced over, it is a nightmare to figure it out later. All right, so does this make sense? Thumbs up if you're with me. Sideways if you want me to say that one more time. Gotcha. All right. So for I in range, that means that whatever this number is how many times we're going to repeat it. Now, there are other variations of this, but for right now, all we're doing is how many times we want it to repeat. The box needs 4 sides, so we need it to repeat 4 times. We need to draw a side and turn 4 times. That helping? All right. Now, when we get into other for loops, we can have a start and a stop location. And we also could tell it how many, like if we want to do every other one, we could tell it that. But for right now, we're concentrating on counting loops that run the number of times inside the parentheses. That make sense? That help? All right. So what else do we have left in this little adventure? So now we're down to part 2. We want to compute the average price of a car. We've done this before. I cannot believe how many of you guys do not know how to do the math for an average. So let's try this one more time and do math with averages. So comment says put part 2 in. Now, you've done this in a previous exercise, right? We did it for 3 cars. We're going to make this a little bit different. Why did it tab over? Because it still thinks we're in the for loop. So we're going to have to manually tell it to backspace out of the for loop. So I'm going to backspace. And now I can start writing on the edge again. So we want to prompt the user. Anytime you see in my directions, prompt the user. You see that term, means you're going to use an input statement. Right? So I'm going to prompt the user for the number of car prices to enter. So how many prices am I expecting the user to enter? So this one needs a number. So we're going to put a variable over here, and I'm going to call it num cars. So that's how many cars we're going to be working with, right? And it's going to be equal to input. And yeah, I know I abbreviated, the directions didn't, I'm not taking off for that, but I'm lazy. Num is easier than number. And that's not exactly the prompt that was in the book, probably, the directions either, I'm typing off the top of my head, but you need to put something in there that makes sense. I've had a few people just put an input statement with no words, and I'm just supposed to guess when I run it, what I'm supposed to be giving you. So we're trying to get you used to doing a good user experience, so make sure your prompts are clear. I give you some examples in the labs and the assignments, and you're welcome to use them. Absolutely, 100%. Use the ones I give you if you want to. But if you want to write something that's similar, that's fine too, as long as it's clear what you're asking. All right, so I'm going to enter the number of cars. I'm going to convert that to an integer, right? Because right now it's a string. Right, this looks familiar. We do a float. Need a float because cars have a fractional portion, or at least I hope you're not driving a car with a fractional portion. That would be unsafe. Half a car is just not going to get you very far, not safely anyway.
Not just a motorcycle.
Not. I'm not sure a motorcycle is half of a car. It's got half as many tires, but it's got a lot fewer seats.
And it's less safe.
It's definitely less safe. It's more fun, but less safe. All right, so we're getting off topic. So now we want to sum up all of the prices that they're going to give us. So if we're going to ask them for the number of cars, that means that we need to prompt them to enter prices for that many cars. And since we're using loops, it'd be easier if we put that prompt inside of a loop, right? Because then we don't have to write it. And since we don't know how many cars they're going to enter, we couldn't write it anyway. We got to have something to tell it how many times to do it. So we're going to use a for loop for this. And inside of here, we need to know how many times this loop needs to run. And with a box, it was really easy. We knew it only had 4 sides. So we just hard coded the number 4 in there. But we don't know what the user is going to put in here. So what you can do is just put the variable in this spot, and whatever the user types in goes into the variable. It's converted to a number. That number then can be reused inside the loop. So we put num cars right here. It's going to go that many times. Yes. So in here, I want to have an input statement asking for the price of the car. Right? So we also need to calculate the sum of all those prices. Right? So we can do that in 1 or 2 ways. We can do it 2 steps, get the price, and then do the calculation. Or we can get the price and add it to the sum we already have going. But either way, we need a variable to keep up with the sum or the total. Right? So the thing about loops is that once they start, everything starts over, or it kind of is temporary. It clears and it goes away once it gets done. So we need to make sure if we want to use that total, that we declare the variable before the loop happens. And we want to do that because we want it to continue to exist once the loop stops. So I'm going to create the variable to keep the sum before the for loop. So I'm gonna come back up here and I'm gonna go sum equals 0. Now, sum is not usually my preferred choice for a variable name. Why? Because it's a keyword and it turns purple. And it kind of breaks that. So every time I teach this, I keep telling myself I'm gonna go back and make it total, and I keep forgetting to update the directions. But you can make it total if that makes it clearer to you, but sum will also work. It just is purple. So inside of here, I now need sum equals sum plus I'm gonna make this bigger where my line doesn't go off the screen.
One paper dry.
All right, so if I do this, all right, you guys are distracted, please stop. If I do this, what it says is I'm gonna take the value of sum, which in this case to begin with is 0, right? Because I said equal to 0 to begin, and we're gonna add it to whatever they enter. Now this seems logical that it would work. The problem here is that everything comes in as a string. So could I go ahead and put the float in the same line? Yeah. At this point, though, I feel like I've got too much going on in a line. So I'm going to break it up into 2 steps. And I'm going to get a price. And then I'm just going to add price to the sum. But I am going to convert price to a float before I start adding. Now, can I add an integer and a float together? Absolutely, because they're both numbers. The sum is an integer right now. It's going to get changed to a float. Does this make sense? The math majors are on the front row are saying yes, but now, so what this loop is going to do is however many cards the user tells me they want to add up, going to run that many times. It's going to ask the question into the price of the car that many times. I want to convert that price to a float, and then I'm going to add the price to the sum. And every time the loop runs, price changes. But sum consists because it was created outside of the loop. Does that make sense? So if you keep scrolling down, you see that the code's actually written for you. It's amazing how these labs are pretty much done for you. I'm trying to be nice. I give you easy grades, right?
Thank you.
And then after you're done, you want to print out the sum just to make sure it's right. Now, the key here is if I just put that line of code right here, indented in underneath, it's going to print it every time the loop runs. But we only want it to print once, so we need to get outside of the loop. How do we get out of the loop? We just backspace over to where it's not indented. And now we can put in our print statement. I swear I can spell and type, just not well.
Now, I could leave this tabbed over, and it's not going to come up as a compile error. It's going to run your box. And then you have to click back over here to finish running the rest of it. Let's say I'm going to put in 4 cars. And we're going to put in one. They're going to be cheap cars. So if I leave the print statement indented in, every time I enter a car, it printed. And I don't really need that. So if you have too much printing out, then you probably have left your print statement inside your loop. Not really a big deal when you're doing 4 numbers. If you were doing 4 million numbers and it was printing after each one, that slows your computer processes down. So just make sure that that is not indented and it's outside your loop. So now it should just run once and give me the total. And you might want to comment your turtle out until you get finished testing everything, where you don't have to watch it draw every time, but that's up to you. And before somebody asks me, yes, this is exactly how I test your code when you give it to me. I put in really tiny numbers because I can do the math in my head. And yes, I use the same numbers on every one. So that's how I catch if your math equations don't work. If your numbers don't come out to what I think they should be, I go, oh, let me go look at your math equation and figure out what you did wrong. All right, so we have the sum. So now we want to get the average. And the average is equal to the sum divided by the num cars, right? And then I can, again, print oops, wrong run. My turtle draws. Okay. Now, did I format my print where it only had 2 decimal places? No, not a requirement for this particular one. If you want to go back and look inside books and get the print formatting and do that, feel free. Never hurts to start practicing those things because you will eventually need them. But right now, I don't think this lab requires that. Part 3 is print the suits in a deck of cards. Yes. Now, this one actually has us creating a list for our for loop. And we are technically out of time for this class, but I don't think there's anybody in here after me today. So if you want to stick around, I'll go ahead and go through part 3. You want to go or you have another class? Now's the time to edit it. Huh? Is it 10:50? It's supposed to be 9:55? Okay. I'm wrong. We got at 10:45 on the other days. Is that what it is? Okay. I'm wrong. I got 10 more minutes then. I'm good. All right. I told you it's been a week of Mondays. So we have this. So now we're down to part 3. We want to add a print statement. Oops. So I added a print statement that says the suits and the deck of cards are. And then under that, I want to print out all 4 suits and the deck of cards, right? So would I really set up a loop to do this if all I was doing was printing out 4 items? Probably not in reality, but we want to show you how a list and a for loop works. So we're going to use a for loop to do this. So in here, now I want to do a for loop, for suit in now, what this is telling me is that for some variable, and I picked suit as the variable because that's what we're talking about, right? In a list, because the square brackets mean list. And then I typed in all the pieces that are in the list. So there's hearts, diamonds, clubs, spades. Right? So I created a list with each element separated by a comma. I keep looking because I'm sure I misspelled something. And then I want to get each suit out one at a time. So I have a temporary variable that's going to hold the element in the list. And it's going to do them in order. This loop does every element in order. Right? So the first time through, suit's going to be hearts. The second time through, suit's going to be diamonds. The third time it runs, it's going to be clubs. The fourth time, it's going to be spades. So now I just need to print out the suits. So if you've typed this line correctly and you hit enter, it will automatically in idle tab over where it should start the next line. If it doesn't automatically tab, you have probably left the semicolon off the end of the line. That's a very common error. And the easy way to catch a missing, well, I guess it's not a semicolon. The easiest way to catch a colon being missing is when you hit enter, it doesn't go indented. So in here, I need a print statement. And I'm just going to print the suit. And when I run this, I get my boxes. And then I get to put in prices. And then it prints out the things in the items in the list. Now, the assignment builds off of this. It's going to be very similar to this, but it's going to build off of this, right? That hurt your feelings? Why did that hurt your feelings? All right. So again, notice that there's a grading scale down here for their labs. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room in this. If you turn in something that works, you get a 4. If it's mostly working, you get a 7. If it's perfect, you get a 10. I just wrote the whole thing for you and videotaped it, and will be posted on my YouTube channel later this afternoon as soon as it processes. I can't do it immediately. It takes time to process. There's no reason that everybody should not be getting a 10 on all these labs, because even if you don't want to watch me explain it, you should be able to go to the end of the video and look at the code, right? So anyway, that is all of lab 3. If you have questions, stick around and I'll answer them. I'm coming to you first. Stick your hands up. If you do not have questions, feel free to vacate the premises at this point. The assignment 3, I think it's called assignment loops or something. It is due on Tuesday night at 11:59. If you have questions between now and then, email me. Or stick around. I'm gonna be here till we're finished answering questions right now, and I also have office hours today from 1 to 3.